Good morning, everyone. This is Nathaniel Lee. Thanks for joining us once again today. We have a superstar panel, Attorney Primes and Grimes, and we thank you for joining us again. But before I get started, I run into many of you in the grocery stores, on the streets, and the thing that keep bothering me is that, yes, it's true about this voting thing. It's driving me crazy. Tell all your friends and neighbors that even if they've been convicted of a felony in Indiana, once you get out of prison, you can vote. So make sure your friends, your relatives who's had some trouble with the law. What irked me, quite frankly, when the young lady I saw in Kroger was talking about a person that had a misdemeanor, they didn't want to vote. Folks, please dispel that rumor and tell your friends, your neighbors, they can vote. Make sure they get registered because we had too many people, particularly here in Marion County, that didn't vote because they thought they couldn't vote. So no more excuses, and make sure that you move forward. Now, the other thing is that you wanted clarification about this law. Yeah, they changed our laws in Indiana in terms of accidents, and I need to explain that to you once more because maybe I wasn't clear. Now, if you don't have your seatbelt on in Indiana, essentially what happens is that it can be used to reduce your damages. So just make sure you buckle up. The life you save may be your own. Okay, having said that, I got that out the way. Gentlemen, earlier this week, there was a resounding order issued by a federal judge that dealt with law firms who were subject to executive order. It was a wide-ranging opinion that was, 50 some odd pages, but it was fascinating. It had to do with the fact that the current president of the United States issued an executive order against law firms that he didn't like because they had represented people adverse to his interests, and he took proactive steps to try to ruin their firm by saying, for example, they couldn't even come into federal building. And much to my chagrin, there was documented a case, Milton, Marlon, where the law firm who had a client meeting with the Department of Justice, and the Department of Justice lawyers apparently contacted them, told them they couldn't come into the building. I don't understand this. Why would lawyers follow something that they know is crazy like that? I don't get it.
Yeah, I agree with you. And certainly good morning, everyone. In addition to practicing law, you have an oath of office that you are an officer of the court, and every pleading that you file has to comply with what's known as Rule 11, that you have to have a good faith basis for the arguments that are being made. And some of the problems that the administration is having in some of these cases is that they're having a hard time finding people that are going to sign the pleadings. Because some of this stuff is just truly outrageous. I mean, to think that, we would have an order from anybody in authority, let alone the president, that someone cannot go into a federal courthouse is pretty astounding. And I think the judge was pretty astounded by it as well. The one thing I will say that the judge noted is that the administration was transparent that they were doing it to retaliate. So it was very brazen, very disappointing. But I think that the judicial branch is holding, and they are, issuing some important decisions to just remind everyone that that we're a country of laws, and that we have three branches of government, and we do not have a king.
Yeah, it seems absurd that they would file such a petition or complaint to me, Nate. I think I responded to that 52-page opinion by the judge, essentially that it's against the law, it's against the Constitution, it's against common sense, what Trump was trying to do. So I commend the judge for taking the time to research and lay out the law clearly to Trump and his administration that they're wrong. But it's not going to stop him, is it? Huh?
Yeah, and this was a Bush appointee. Judge John Bates issued the decision in the Jenner Block case. So, we're getting judges from both sides of the political aisle that have been appointed by both parties that are coming to the same conclusion that there is overreach.
I don't know who wrote it, but I've always looked at the issue of judicial economy, wasting the court's time with frivolous matters. And that's what this complaint seems to be doing. I don't know why the judge didn't say that, and I don't know why he gave them that much time to write a 52-page order, but that's what happened.
Well, when I looked at the lawsuit that they had filed, I was trying to read the lawsuit, but the complaint was like, 100 and some odd pages? I mean, I was thinking to myself, this is a big burden he's placed on these law firms. And I was looking at the Kirkland Ellis law firm, and I looked at the record bonuses that the partners earned last year. They made just crazy money, and they folded right away because they somehow thought that it may affect their firm, even though they make more money than any law firm on the planet. But I was concerned about that when you have such a rich, prominent, and powerful law firm that bends at the knees and folds so quickly. And it made me think, if you're a law firm and you can't protect your own right, what does that say about you protecting the rights of your clients? Will you sell them out too?
Nathaniel, I've done a few cases involving celebrities, and I won't name them, but they were people recognized around the country as, successful stars. And I've always witnessed, I shouldn't say always, most of the time I've seen them tell their lawyers what they're going to do, not going to do, and this is what you're going to do. And lawyers just meekly go about following their clients' directions and orders. And to me, it's appalling. I've seen young, successful music people ruin their careers by doing the wrong thing against the advice of their lawyers, but the lawyers stand right there beside them and let them do those things. So this is similar to that. The lawyers are buckling down with the commands and demands of their client just because they're getting paid. And they won't take the position that I think a lawyer has the responsibility of taking, and that is telling the client, this is wrong. I'm not going to do this, or this is wrong. You shouldn't do that. But they don't even go as far as telling the person, you're wrong and you shouldn't do something. They just meekly go about doing what the client demands. I've seen that a lot out here in LA.
I've seen it in the Midwest as well, in Ohio and other parts of the country. And I think, the viewer should really understand, and particularly, those that are practicing law or those that are engaging lawyers, is that your career is not a sprint, it's a marathon. It's your career is not going to necessarily be defined by one case. And one of the things I often tell the client is advice that I receive is that, I want to be perceived as a good attorney when I'm with you at a time of battle and when the smoke clears. And if you're just telling people what they want to hear, when the smoke clears, it's going to be apparent that there were some deficiencies in your advice. And that's going to be more damaging to your reputation
Right.
long term. So you have to look at it from a long-term perspective. In the short term, you very well may lose some clients, you may lose some money, but I think you'll sleep better, and I think you'll probably make more money in the long run.
Well, in my career, I've had several clients who they see something on the internet or they talk to one of their friends and they obtain misinformation. And once they obtain misinformation, it becomes sacrosanct. They said, this is the way it should be done. And then I always saw it as my job is try to show them, no, this is not accurate. And the advantage I got is that I've dealt with almost every situation imaginable, and I could actually give them case and decision. But at the end of the day, it's been my position all along. If at that point in time, if the client don't follow your advice, then you terminate the client. You go
Right.
on to the next case, because if I will not let a person harm themselves in legal litigation by taking erroneous advice. And I see this all the time. I see it every day. There's a lot of things that bothers me. We do a lot of settlements in addition to jury trials. And I'll give you some example. And it's a little bit off subject, but say you have a client A who get a settlement check for, say, $50,000, and they don't have a bank account. One of the things that drives me crazy is that so many people go to cash checking services to cash a check. Then I found out this week they're charging 3%.
Right.
So you have a $50,000 check, they're charging $1,500 to cash a check, and all that client got to do is deposit money in the bank where we bank at. It just drives me crazy. So why would you give those people $1,500 to cash a check, and all they do is deposit in their account?
Right. I think part of the problem is is that there's check systems that you have to go through to start an account. And we have a whole group of people for a variety of reasons may not be able to meet that threshold. So as a consequence, instead of going to some of your large, established banks, their only recourse is to go to these check cashing places. And in Ohio, in other parts of the country, there was a move to kind of rein these check cashing places in, because in addition to taking, this 3%, they're charging a whole bunch of other fees. And it really is troublesome, because someone that may be working a minimum wage job or not making a whole lot of money, already stressed. This is just additional burden on their family. It makes it more difficult for them to maintain themselves. Some of these folks may not have cars, they're riding the bus. So it just creates a whole underclass, and it kind of almost goes to the conversation that we're having about politics, in the sense that people that are dealing with these particular situations, they can't see Democrat and Republican. They feel as though, hey, they're left behind. And that's why you're seeing a lot of these statistics where people just aren't voting.
Addressing your point, Nate, I've had a client in the recent years where the Bank of America, Chase, Union Bank, USA Bank, all denied him an account because he had had trouble with his finances. But he was able to get an account at a smaller, I don't recall if it was a savings and loan, but a credit union. It was a credit union. He was able to get an account there. They don't have the same rigorous rules as the larger banks do. So I don't know if your client would have fit the requirements of a smaller institution, a credit union, but there are those that can. Get into your other point about, I experienced a client that was in jail facing 9 years in prison, and he had been sued civilly by two individuals. And I said, well, you have to answer your, you have to give a deposition even though you're in jail. He said, no, my civil lawyer tells me, my lawyer tells me I do not have to do a deposition. I said, you got to do a deposition, or they are going to strike your answer, set aside your answer, and the judge is going to enter a default against you, and it could hit you for several millions of dollars. He stubbornly said, no, I'm not doing a deposition. Within 2 months, the judge had dismissed his answer to the complaint. The plaintiff had entered a request for a default. The judge granted that default, and the person proved up. It gets more complicated than that, because the plaintiffs had contacted me and said, look, tell your client, I don't think his other attorney is selling him right. Tell him we were selling this for $600,000. I told the guy that. Anyway, they set aside his answer in a default, and I think the judgment was like $22.7 million. I mean, simple as that, because his main lawyer, who'd been with him a long time, longer than I was on the criminal case, told him, no, you don't have to do a deposition. I mean, it's just that simple. And so clients do what they want to do,
Tragic.
or what someone ill advised them to do. And I see it a lot with athletes and rappers and people in the music industry. The lawyers will let them do what they want to do, and it's oftentimes not in their best interest. So I don't.
Hey, the next topic that been resonating all week. I don't know if you've been following it. This Sean Diddy Combs trial, and I saw where not Marvin Gaye, but
Will
the
Smith.
gentleman that's 90, Smokey Robinson.
Okay, he's got his
Yeah.
own out here.
You got lawsuit out there in your neck of the wood in California. Have you
Right.
been following that case?
Not only with a little interest, Nate. He's got 4 different housekeepers or people who work for him, accusing him over the years of molesting them, right? Is that what you're talking about?
Yes.
Yeah, that's the only, I don't know the statements, I don't know the facts surrounding these incidents, alleged incidents of sexual assault. I know that Brian Scott has an allegation against him by a woman who was 15 years old, 37 years ago. That she
What?
filed a lawsuit against Byron Scott. Yeah,
Wow.
I read that.
37 years ago?
37 years ago, when the lady was 15 years old, supposedly some representatives of the Lakers went to her high school and they were doing some presentation, and allegedly Scott got her down the hall in a broom closet and there sexually assaulted her.
37 years ago.
37 years ago, yes.
Yes.
Wow. But
Well-
Smokey Robinson then filed a counter lawsuit. He's 85. He filed a counter lawsuit against the women and their lawyer for defamation for 500 million. I
Mhm.
mean, that's going to be a fascinating case to watch. But I don't understand. The statute of limitations apparently have been abrogated in a lot of states.
Right.
In most states, it'd be from 1 to 4 years for typical tort actions. Apparently, there's been some erosion of the statute of limitations in several states.
The governor has set aside the statute applying to these old incidents of sexual molestation out here.
Really?
So they can file these belated lawsuits.
But how do you prove a case? I was just curious. How do you go about proving a case that happened 37 years ago?
I guess your word against theirs. I don't know what evidence they have. But it's against a famous person with a lot of money, and a lot of people look at the settlement value of the case.
But the other thing too is that we do have to call out, inappropriate behavior. And I think, to the audience out there, we have to really kind of condition ourselves. Just because someone's successful, just because they have some money, doesn't mean they're going to be a good life partner for you. And, I was fortunate enough to have, a mom and dad, and taught me morals and values in terms of, what it meant to be a man or a woman. And sometimes we just get so far afield of that. And we idolize people and we put them on pedestals, and we don't do a clear examination of who and what they are. The thing that concerns me about, P. Diddy and R. Kelly is that, somebody had to know about this stuff. I mean, they did a lot of this heinous activity in the public, the beatings, just the behavior. And, you wonder if, these record companies, liquor companies, all these, companies that have these, huge deals, what they knew and when they knew it. Now, we just had a conversation just a moment ago about, just, lawyers and, not, telling people the right thing. Even if it may have consequences against our bottom line. I think the same thing holds true for a lot of these record companies that have made these deals over the years. Now, I don't know precisely what they saw, but it just seems from the testimony that, P. Diddy, R. Kelly, they were just open about the behavior. Somebody had to know something. And so I think it will be interesting to see, how, those potential claims, manifest themselves. But I think it's really important, in terms of just our community, when you're, interacting with children you raise, children that you mentor, we really have to, focus in on what truly is important. We've really got off into our society about bling, and I've seen, things on social media. Hey, I'm not going to go out with someone if they can't take me to this type of place or that type of place. And it's just a fool's errand. What is this? What is inside this person's heart? What type of person are they? Are they going to work? Are they going to, be a person that's going to be a life partner, that's going to be with me when times are good or bad? These are things that are really important.
Well, Grimes, ever since I've started looking at things beyond my own home and beyond myself, I've read about the Hollywood set being one that took advantage of young starlets or young actors trying to get that next big role or trying to get a big role, and how the administrators and the directors and producers of these different of movies and the music industry took advantage of young people. And this has been going on a long time. Weinstein and Rolansky. And I remember one time seeing where Shirley Temple, I believe, was invited to an adult party when she was 5 years old. So this didn't just start. This has been going on for a while. It seems as though it's more um, notoriety about it now that you got R. Kelly and P. Diddy and Bill Cosby and some African American men involved allegedly in this type of conduct. But this stuff has been going on a long time in our entertainment industry, guys, from what I've read and seen.
My concern, though, with this P. Diddy case is that the case that as I follow part of this case, they allege deplorable conduct, but the conduct that they're talking about is battery, it's spousal abuse, it's state crimes, right? That probably should have been prosecuted under state law. This conspiracy theories that they filed against him doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I'm not a criminal lawyer, but the case, federal charges dealt with racketeering, conspiracy, sex trafficking. And that's why I was concerned. I'm thinking the evidence that I've seen doesn't fit that particular crime. And that's why I was concerned that they've shown battery and other state type crimes, but I just don't see the federal crime that he's charged with. And that's what my concern is, because you got a guy rich and powerful and you got a lot of lawsuits, and they're trying to extract money from this individual. On the other hand, though, we settle cases every day for people that do bad things, from wrongful death and accidents or otherwise, and then they don't go to jail. They pay out large sums of money and they buy their peace, and the case, go on, because we do civil cases to collect damages. So in this case here, you have people seeking monetary damages, like the one lady he beat up horribly. She took a $20 million settlement. And so I was concerned about that in terms of our legal system.
I just haven't kept up with it well enough, Nate, to give an intelligent, if I've given an intelligent opinion, but I just have not kept up with it well enough. When I go on the internet and look up stuff that I see to see if it was true or not. They got Will Smith testifying. They got a video of Prince supposedly before he died, putting things in his vault about Diddy doing this to people and something's got to be done. And I don't know what's true or what's uh, artificial intelligence or what's lies anymore on the stuff that I do pick up on the internet about this trial. So it's hard for me to take a position because I don't know what information I've seen on the internet is true or false. Um, they got Terrence Howard making some comments about Puffy's behavior over the years and being a man. They got 50 Cent saying the same thing. I don't know how much of this stuff has come into the trial or not. Do you? Do you guys?
I think a lot of the stuff has been debunked, especially regarding Prince and things of that sort. But I think I just have to just reiterate the behavior is just reprehensible. And and I think, just so our audience is clear, I mean, you have a state criminal system, and that basically means, laws that were passed by the local authorities might be a city council or the state legislature. And then in order to get to federal crimes, those are laws that are passed by the United States Congress and things that impacted interstate commerce, things that you did over state lines. And so there's always been a friction between state prosecutors and federal prosecutors, and many, state prosecutors feel as though that the federal government comes in and they charge what are essentially state crimes and federalize them. Because the U.S. Attorney's Office over the past, 30 years, Milton, when you probably, started practicing, they were a fraction of the size that they were because there wasn't that expansive of a view of federal jurisdiction.
Right.
So I get the whole idea about hey, this may be some overreach, but at the same time, this is just reprehensible, horrendous, unexcusable behavior. I mean, in terms of, what we saw on the video of him beating Cassie and kicking her like a dog. I mean, it's just, reprehensible. Now, the other thing I'll tell the audience is that when you come to federal court, Nathaniel is correct. You need to check all the boxes to make sure that cause of action has been met by, a reasonable doubt. That's a very, very high standard. It's not more likely than not 50%. It has to be a really, really, really high standard in order to meet. And so I get that, but there's always this friction between the state and the federal. But it's just really important that, we point out that it's just bad behavior. The other point that I'll make finally that's really important for your audience is that oftentimes what federal prosecutors do to get a conviction when all the elements may not be met is that they dirty up a client or a defendant and bringing up all sorts of things that the person may have done. And the reality of it is that, juries are more apt to convict people that they do not like. And so I think what the prosecutions have been doing is they've been bringing a lot of information in about this really, really bad behavior in hopes that the jury may not look at all of the elements to see if there is a federal jurisdiction and there's a violation of federal law. Now, obviously, there's something that he did that's really awful, but the question is, should it have been in the state court or should it have been in the federal court?
Okay, let's go to the caller. Caller, you have a question or comment for us today?
Yeah, my question is simply, Nate, do you know anything about this IndianaVoters.com voter list maintenance? It seems like there's been a lot of emails and direct mail coming to people's homes, telling them, asking if they live at this address. If they don't, they need to contact the IndianaVoters.com VLM. It seems like they're starting this maintenance pretty quick under this new governor we got, and I'm wondering if that's happening in other states like Milton, where you are out in California. They're not going to waste any time, I think, basically dealing with the election law coming up, because obviously within less than 2 years we'll be voting again, and I think certain folks are going to do everything they can to probably thwart the efforts of the election. I appreciate all the comments about Diddy and all that, but at this point, I'm more concerned about what's going to happen in the next 6
Well,
months.
wait a second. To answer your question, I got that back in March. I got a postcard in the mail and wanted to verify that I live at that address. I took it and threw it in the trash can because I voted in every election for the last umpteen years. And the voter registration here in Indianapolis is safe. We have a very good process in place. And a person can check their voter registration by checking with the local Marion County clerk's office, and they could check also on the internet. So I would not respond to the state. I would just simply contact the local authority who controls our voting here in Marion County. And I never know when I receive things in the mail whether or not it's a scam or not. And I encourage people. You know, I don't believe that because there's so much misinformation. Until I don't trust that type of information. I'll just contact the local authorities myself because that could be a form of voter intimidation. I don't know. I know that it's not a good thing.
Yeah, that's exactly my point. I like you, have voted in every election since I've been old enough to vote, and I'm plenty old. But at the end of the day, I'm just wondering if it's happening in other states because I do believe there's something that's going to be intimidated about this. I don't know why I got this, but I talked to several neighbors, they got it as well. So I'm just thinking they're cleaning things up, getting ready for what's going to happen in the next 2 months. But thanks for taking my call. I'll listen to the rest of the show.
Yeah, that is happening in other parts of the country, and in Ohio as well. And it's very regressive because, statistically, a lot of our people, may be renting and they may go from one apartment to another. And so when they send out these voter registration and it comes back, what a lot of these states are doing is they're purging voter rolls. So you really have to be careful about that. And, it really kind of skews against our interests in terms of them doing this. So it's really important, that we push back, and really differentiate between these whole ideas of making sure voting is secure and fair, as opposed to tilting the balance one way or the other. The other thing I'm just going to say real quickly that's really important in terms of voting that I really want to, tell your audience, not only in Ohio, but across the country, it's not only important to vote for, the governor or the president. These judicial races, these prosecutor races, these are really important. I hear so many people say, well, hey, I'm confused. I don't know who to vote for, or I just don't vote at all for judicial candidates. As we can see from the conversation we've been having just about, the president, the administration, judges, this stuff is really important. There's a lot of information out there, League of Women Voters, a lot of information that you can get to find out the backgrounds of these judges, these prosecutors. Is really important. So not only exercise your right to vote, but also, get educated as well.
But you got to admit, Marlon, the judges running, usually they don't reach the public's eye unless they've had some high-profile case that has been heard and watched. But typically, people don't run across their information on a daily basis like you might for a lawyer who is running for office and does a lot of appearances around the city or the county that they're running in. So I see that as a problem with voting.
I think
that is a problem. I agree, Milton, because, for example, here in Indiana, and nowhere like ours in the whole freaking state. In our state, Republicans took over the selection of judges process. Used to, back after the Nixon debacle, the Republicans and Democrats cut a deals here in Indianapolis where about half the judges would be Democrats, half would be Republican after all the Republican lost in the midterm election following the Nixon debacle. Well, that model stayed true for many years. And then all of a sudden, the Indianapolis area is about 75% Democrat. What that means is that any selection of judges now, every judge in the county would be a Democrat. along with the magistrates, commissioners, otherwise. So everybody will be Democrats. Well, that struck a nerve. So Republicans changed the rule to say, oh, wait a second. We'll have a special committee that select judges, and the judge will appoint judges here in Indianapolis. And once they're appointed, then they are subject to a retention vote. Now, getting back to what you said earlier, nobody knows who these judges are. And so whether to retain them or not. And so even if there was a bad judge, as a lawyer, you'll be afraid to attack that because they might inadvertently attack a good judge. And most of our judges are outstanding. We only got one or two that I don't think that should be on the bench, but by and large, they're outstanding judges. And so the problem we get into is that we've lost the real accountability by having the judges come before the voters. And but that's a different story, because at the end of the day, in order to take back the ability to govern ourselves in Indianapolis, we had to get the Indianapolis voters to get off their posterior and then get out and vote. You know, we have about 40% vote in the last election. It was embarrassing.
Well, good point there, and I agree, with Milton and Nathaniel that a lot of people may not know all the particulars of a judge unless he or she is in the news. But what we've done in Ohio, particularly in Cleveland, is the African American Bar Association. We rank the judges, and we work in concert with the Majority Bar Association, and those rankings, go to the experience that lawyers have with individual judges. And I think those have been very helpful in terms of just educating people that may not be in court every day about, judges that may not be fair or, perhaps, should not be on the bench.
Okay, Carl, you have a question or comment for us today. Go ahead.
I have a question. So have you attorneys heard about the situation that's going on in St. Louis, Missouri, where all those tornadoes came through, destroyed things, and that the St. Louis proper, which is mostly Black, did not get any FEMA help, but all the surrounding areas, which are mostly white, did get FEMA trucks coming in, and a lot of those homes are destroyed, and many of them didn't have insurance, property insurance, because they were passed down from generation to generation, and I guess some generations or some people just didn't keep up the insurance. So have you heard about that, and do you think that will wake Black folks up to, voting has consequences, so perhaps they should get out and vote?
Well, my response to that is the Doge people came in, and a lot of the Republicans, despite the fact they campaigned to help people, their goal was to get rid of FEMA, which got to be one of the dumbest things I've ever seen. We have a dramatic increase in climate type issues. Like we have more hurricanes, more tornadoes, more rainstorms than we've ever had before. And we need a system in place to help those folks that are in need. When tragedies like this strike, when you lose your power, your roads, and you have debris everywhere, it's a terrible thing. I had firsthand knowledge of what happened down in Louisiana following Hurricane Katrina. We took some members of our law firm down there for a week to volunteer to help out. I was so touched by the mass suffering. And so we sent water and supplies, and we decided to help out and do volunteer work down there for a week. And it was an important lesson by seeing the human suffering and seeing how bad these catastrophic things could be. And there's not a whole lot you could do about it. At the time, though, we had a good response by the administration. At that time, we had George Bush. They started off a little bit rocky, but once they got going, there was a lot of assistance provided. But, it's a devastating type thing. So if you've never experienced one of those things before, it's just shocking how much human suffering that occurs when you have these national disasters. And you got to have a FEMA and federal assistance because local people can't handle the magnitude of the works that's necessary. We can manage a simple utility outage following a storm. Sometimes that takes several days, but not a mass destruction that we're seeing by these ongoing tornadoes, flooding, and hurricanes.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think the audience should be aware that there's kind of a budgetary tactic that's been discussed for a number of years. And one of the things that goes to the particular issue is, shutting down, entities like FEMA and providing that money just to states. And I think that's going to be problematic because you do need a national standard. We're also seeing those same type of discussions, with, Medicaid as well. So I think we need to really be weary of that in turning that over to states. They're going to be cutting a lot in terms of, the budget to allow individuals to be able to respond to disasters or to healthcare crisis, things of that sort.
I don't like the threat of cutting the funds that should be appropriated to California as a result of the recent fires, especially over in the Pasadena, Altadena area. And there's a significant Black population that was affected by those fires. I honestly don't know where it stands now as to the federal government helping out, but I do know that that was an issue several weeks ago. Maybe you guys know better than I.
I've honestly not, there's every day, let's make the record straight, there is information coming out of administration that is adverse to many people in America. It's hard to keep track of the calamity that occurs that we see on a regular basis. Just following just a law firm debacle is exhausting by itself.
Right.
None of those pleadings or litigation is something you can read in an hour or two. I mean, it takes you an entire day to read and digest the lawsuit that was filed.
Right.
I started reading part of it and I said, hell with it. I mean, it's going to take about 2 to 3 hours to read this 100-page lawsuit. And that's what is going on. So it's hard to follow all these crazy things that are going. We saw during the campaign, a president was very sympathetic to the people in North Carolina. And then after he got elected and he hadn't come back. And so when I looked at the budget that was passed, I didn't see the allocation of funds. Maybe I missed it for FEMA. I was trying to follow some of the things in this budget that they passed the House, and hopefully it dies a quick death in the Senate. So the point is that we need agencies like that. They're very important to Americans.
Heck yeah. Yeah. Okay. Then I'm not the Long Ranger in this. Thank you.
You have additional comment, caller?
No, thank you so much. I'll hang up. Thank you.
Okay, then. Now, the one of the notes we got is one of our callers want to know that the lawyers should take a more active role in ranking judges. That's a good point. I think that's important that you have people that actually appears. And my only caveat is that, caller, if you want lawyers to rank judges, there's one bit of information. The lawyers should attest to the fact they've actually appeared or litigated cases before that judge, before they do a ranking. Because if you allow the lawyers just to rank judges, you still get implicit type bias in terms of that process. So you have to get people that actually appear before a judge to actually accurately rank, and that's what we did. I served on the Judicial Evaluation Committee for the bar many years ago, and before I served, they would have ranking for judges, right? And categorically, the Black judges would be ranked lower by there's certain people just give low scores. And when I looked at the tabulation, I said, well, this is not right. I looked at the number of lawyers that appeared in one judge's court for the whole year, and there was like 3 times as many votes as lawyers appeared in her court. So I know 67% of these lawyers had never been in her court. So what I did is that I got them to change the processor locally in terms of how we rank judges, that you have to swear an oath that you actually appeared before the judge. As soon as we did that, the evaluation became pretty standard. The Black judges' rating went way up because now you had people actually appeared and gave accurate information. And that's what you have to do if you're going to have a process of ranking judges. You have to make sure that the lawyers actually appear before the judge in order to get an accurate analysis. Now, but we notice now that we have something unusual. The latest episode for the current administration is that they decided they're not going to use evaluation judges by the Bar Association anymore, which is shocking. So we could have federal judges go through the nomination process who never appeared in court before now. I mean, that could be disastrous. I don't know how you feel about that, Milton and Marlon, but I think it's a terrible thing to have people become federal judges without any prior trial experience.
For some reason, I was just sitting here thinking while you were talking, it seems to be one of the most inaccurate processes that I participate in whenever I used to have a case before a judge in LA, say, or Orange County or surrounding counties that I did not know. I'd call a local attorney, or I'll call this attorney to see what they thought about him, and they give me the name of somebody else that they think had appeared before that judge, and that person would say something. And occasionally I've been able to find a friendly judge who will comment about their fellow judge. But it is the most amateurish way of trying to get information on a person that I've ever undertaken. If I would apply that as due diligence to my cases on a whole, I don't think I would be very successful at getting good information. So it's a haphazard way of finding information about judges. It just seems as though that office keep them from a lot of keep you from gathering a lot of information about them. I can ask one attorney about this judge, oh, it's the greatest judge in the world. Ask another attorney, oh, they full of mess, they're unfair, and da because of your outcome wasn't satisfactory. So it's not a very reliable system that I've seen. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think it's a danger to the public, not having the American Bar Association be involved with the vetting process. There's multiple processes. The White House, the senators for those states are involved in vetting, but not having the American Bar Association involved. They look at do a deep dive in terms of writings, legal research, cases that individual has had. I think those are important check and balance, because the federal judiciary, the only position in our whole federal system where it's a lifetime appointment. The president has a limited term, the senators have a limited term, but these are lifetime appointments, and they deal with very, very important issues. So I'm all for vetting, and I think that limiting that vetting, I think, is problematic in my view.
Mm-hmm.
One additional matter on this judges process, for a number of years, I did evaluation of federal judges in this circuit for the civil rights group, for the NAACP, and those evaluation would go to the Senate, and the civil rights groups, to the best of my knowledge, no longer even do that. And I think it's a tragedy, because I did that, 15 years, and we would get reports and evaluate judges, because I actually have databases whereby we pull up information on judges to see how they rule. But the scope of what we were doing back then dealt with the fact that how they rank in terms of minority litigants or defendants. And so we were trying to make sure that a potential judge wouldn't be a racist. And so you have to do a little bit more digging oftentimes to get that type of information. And I'm not aware currently today, Milton or Marlon, whether or not the civil rights group are still doing that type of investigation. And pardon?
Nothing, I didn't mean to cut you off, Nick. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm not sure. And because I did that at least 15 years, and I don't think that they're doing that, because the last time I talked to the NAACP president, I mentioned that to him. I never got an answer as to whether or not they were still doing that. I just thought about that when that came up today.
One of the catastrophic examples of this evaluation we're talking about, he wasn't a judge at the time we were evaluating, but I remember I discussed with you several months ago, Clarence Thomas. I remember being back in Indiana, Indianapolis, that year that they were trying to decide his nomination, and there was a big fight within the National Bar Association as to whether he was qualified to be a judge. And I don't recall the exact count. I just know you didn't vote because you were busy. No, I'm teasing. But Marlon, that was a big fight about qualification of him, and it was a narrow margin, I believe, that he got the National Bar Association endorsement. And look what we got.
Well, Milton, he actually had sought the endorsement, and he participated in the previous bar convention. I remember, for example, we were down in Memphis at the bar convention, and they had this boat cruise, and he was like a 5-year-old. You know, he's gregarious and all that stuff, and he sucked it up to everybody. So he actually worked to secure their support. You're correct. I didn't know a lot about Clarence Thomas at the time.
A lot of people weren't impressed with him, if I recall, from that debate back there then. Saw something wrong with him.
Right. I think that he was, picked early on, when he headed the EEOC, and they knew the person that they were getting. And that's kind of what's going on right now with this project 2025. And not only are they, vetting individuals without a paper trail to serve in the federal judiciary, but they're also doing the same thing in terms of those that would serve in important positions as federal employees. And these can be, jobs that employees can serve in for decades.
Wow. But one final comment on this issue. The vote in Indianapolis to support him was very close. It was contentious debate, as I recall, Milton. It went the whole freaking day. So there were some hard feelings about that on both sides. And I think the people that was against them had a more accurate assessment than the ones that was in favor, as it turns out, And so that's my thoughts. Any final comments before we close today, gentlemen?
We're in difficult times, and we have to probably look a little further than we usually have had to look on deciding candidates running for office today, folks. So yeah, it's important to vote, but try to place an educated vote as much as possible.
Yeah, I agree. Making sure that you get good information. There's a lot of information out there online, but just making sure it's a reputable source. All sources are not equal. Is it somebody that has a degree? Have they studied in this area? Is it a publication that is reliable? Those are things that are very, very important so that you're informed and you use that information to exercise your right to vote in terms of people that are going to be beneficial.
For all you people out there in the public, if you have young voters or friends or family members who get their news from Russia and China, that is TikTok and the social media, they're getting misinformation about politics in America, and they believe this versus the American media. please, please, please try to convince these folks that American media is still the most accurate on the planet. Don't get your news from these social media accounts. They're controlled by a lot of time foreign entity, particularly like TikToks. So don't forget, folks, get everybody, to register to vote, start the process early. We got an election coming up, a couple of elections coming up in the next couple of years. And we need to have people in the position to vote because we got to vote change back to America, get some sanity back in our system. Thank you all. We look forward to talking to you next Saturday. Take care. God bless you.
Bye.